difference between the theological difference between the evangelical and the apostolic churches? And the second part of I have two questions here. And then with that, what is the praxis of that as it moves that model of church into the new emerging communities of Armenia in the last 20 years, or what you're seeing in the future?
Theological difference. I would say the Armenian Evangelical Church is not a classical evangelical church. So our problems with the Armenian Apostolic Church started not because of theological differences, but because of praxis. And then, only after that, when the Armenian Evangelical Church started to develop its theology, we opted for the classical evangelical theology. But even within the Armenian Evangelical movement, there is no uniformity in terms of theology. We have Calvinists, we have Armenians. But the only difference with the Armenian Apostolic Church, I guess, would be the Chalcedonian Creed, if you're familiar with that. So the Armenian Church is one of the churches that did not sign the Chalcedonian Creed of 451. And the traditional churches, Catholics and Greek Orthodox, are usually accusing the Armenian Church of being monophysite church, which is not true, because in the Armenian Apostolic Liturgy, among the heretics, we remember both Eutychius and Nestorius, so the two sides represented in the Chalcedonian Creed, which is again a nonsense, in my view, because you either this or that. You either here or there, but you're cursing both, then where you are. But, it's so theoretical dispute. It was theoretical dispute even in the 5th century, and it still remains a theoretical dispute. Because what people are trying to do, they're trying to make an analogy and think in terms of a precedence when they speak about Christ. And this is a nonsense, because we didn't have an analogy before. We didn't have a precedent before. And we cannot make any comparisons when we speak about Christ. He is unique. So whatever we say might be short of reality. But this is the only difference. In terms of practical application of theology, Armenian Apostolic Church is more liturgy-oriented. So it's traditional church. Unfortunately, they still use in the worship service mainly the Old Armenian, which is understood by 10% of the Armenian population max. We know Grabhar, I mean those who have learned in the school, and probably the clergy of the Apostolic Church, and those who teach in the university this language. But there is one new development in the Apostolic Church. After the liturgy, they're now preaching, as we do in our churches during the worship service. And they do it in modern Armenian, which is very good. So at least the Word of God is being preached in the Apostolic Church at the end of the liturgy, which lasts for 2 hours, to the faithful ones who are able to survive the 2 hours of